podcast. We are here for another week. My name is Sunshine. I'm the pink haired sober witch. And yeah, I'm hoping at some point here, probably in another month, we'll be able to start getting some guests on. But until then, I hope that you're back and I hope that you're good. I hope that you're good. Um, I know last week's session we were talking a little bit about that slime, that ectoplasmic slime. And this week I was sitting there and I was reflecting this weekend. I spent a lot of time last week kind of thinking about what we talked about on the podcast, even what I wrote about, and I needed a reprieve from that. So this weekend was very, very how do I word this? Intentionally full, right? Like in all the like good ways that you want it. And, I was also able to celebrate a couple of things this weekend. Not only myself, but also my partner as well. So he's in recovery. He's active in a lot of the stuff that we do in the Recovery Coven. And, he celebrated, he dropped a painting of his off because it is going to be in a really big art show coming up in this coming weekend and, for the next 2 weekends. And he's wanted to be a part of this show for years. And finally, and for me, on by Friday night, when I was, getting ready to wrap up my evening, I was celebrating. I had finished my next book, right? Like finished it, edited it, laid it out, put it all together, designed the cover, got it loaded and ready to order my proof, which was amazing. And I finalized and sent off all the paperwork that we needed to for the nonprofit. So it was this incredibly full weekend of just like reflecting and celebrating and enjoying each other and being so grateful for the journey. And it inspired today's show. Everything that I wrote and kind of was talking about today. And I think this is something that is not talked about enough in spiritual spaces, in witchcraft communities, right? We can do spell work to bring about changes in our life. That is kind of the beautiful thing around magic. We can do spell work, we can do rituals, we can set intentions, but they can't replace the work of living differently, of taking aligned actions. And I know it might sting a little bit to hear that. I know it might make you feel a little like, what are you talking about aligned actions, right? And the truth is, I have been doing spell work since I was 16 years old. And so we're talking 30 years now. And this was before I got sober. This was before I understood about nervous systems and trauma and kind of what addiction did to us and what recovery meant. And when I look back, I've got over 6 years of recovery under my belt, like of sobriety under my belt. And when I look back, I can say this really clearly. Every single spell that has ever worked within my life has required me to take action. And I'm not talking about like energetically, just like, allowing the universe to happen or, this simple. I'm talking about like physical, emotional. I'm in it and related to it and sometimes uncomfortable action. Every single time that I stayed stuck where something didn't come about, wasn't the spell failing. It was because I refused to follow through on what the universe was putting in front of me, right? I didn't catch it. I didn't see, how it showed up. I didn't, I had a picture in my mind of how magic was supposed to be. And I think a lot of witches have this notion, right? That you set an intention, you light your candle, you call on the divine, and then you just kind of wait, you just kind of wait. And it's not magic, right? That is wishful thinking set up as ritual. Real magic is very precipitate. You have to participate. Precipitory. You have to participate. You have got to put yourself in it, right? And I've had these conversations with clients throughout the years. I have one particular client, uh, I have actually more than one client that I've talked to about love life, and they want a partner, they want this. And so I'm like, okay, cool. How are you getting out there? Well, I don't like the dating apps. Okay. Well, how are you getting out there? Well, I'm really busy. Well, how are you getting out there? Well, I don't want my friends to set me up. I'm just sitting there like, we could do all of the love magic in the world that you wanted, but if you're not taking the action, right? And I think in the beginning, when I started to do spell work, I just kind of understood this instinctively. Like, we are responsible for what shows up in our lives, right? And I can even remember oddly being like 17, 18 years old, got myself in trouble. And even in that instance, my father and I were arguing, and I said, you know what, let me deal with my own consequences, right? Let me deal with my own consequences. That's another way of saying, like, I knew and understood that I was responsible for my own life, right? Even when we ask the divine for guidance, maybe even especially then, it doesn't always mean that I acted on that, but I knew it, right? Sometimes there were just seasons in my life where I was, I don't know, deeply confused, right? I wanted things to change, but instead of changing anything, I just complained. I complained about my job, my relationship, my body, my exhaustion, my unhappiness, like whatever it may be. Like, I just complained and bitched. And of course, nothing would change, right? The definition of insanity is trying to do the same thing and expecting a different result. And that's not because the universe was cruel, right? But it's because I was unwilling to do anything that was different. And the universe does not respond to desire alone, it responds to embodied follow through. And I might even argue that the universe cares more about the actions that we take afterwards than the intention that we set, right? A spell is more than just a statement that we say express out loud, right? It's more than that, right? We invoke, we anoint, we call on the ancestors and the gods and the goddesses and the divine and our guides, and we speak our truth out loud and we embody it in that moment and we feel it. We focus all of our will and we release it into the universe, right? It's amazing. But when we take aligned action, that's when the spell becomes amplified. The embodied action that we take tells the universe, I mean this. I am willing to participate. I am willing to move. I am willing to be uncomfortable. I am willing to change. I am willing to do whatever it is that I need to do to bring forth what it is that I desire. So when I work with the universe, when I cast magic, I listen. I listen for the signs, the synchronicities, the discomfort, the repetition, and I respond to it. Even the simplest forms of magic require you to participate. If you ask the universe to help you find something that you've lost, you still have to look. If you cast a spell for a new home, you still have to browse listings and walk into a door to see it. Magic doesn't bypass the 3D world, it moves through it. One of the places I see this show up so often, right? Outside of that example that I gave you of love, that's another one, right? I realized that after I'd kind of taken my notes, but is around money. So many folks, right? Magic practitioners, witches, people that are doing law of attraction, whatever they may be, right? Um, they do this passive kind of work around abundance. I can't tell you how many people, and I mean, I've literally had people that I've had this conversation with that, like, in that moment this happened, right? They want more money. They've done the spell work, they've done the law of attraction, they've done the manifestations, they've lit the candles, they've anointed the oils, they carry the bill in their purse, and then they block the pathways through which the money could arrive, right? They refuse the help, they refuse a gift. Somebody offers to buy them a cup of coffee, and I mean, this has literally happened. Let me get that for you. I would love to treat. No, 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 no. Don't worry. I've got it. They want abundance, but only in a way that is very specific, very safe, very controlled from their perspective. And the universe doesn't work that way. It doesn't deliver what we want in the packaging that we expect. So if you're not willing to participate in what has been placed in your path, then you're choosing not to participate in the magic that you've asked for. And recovery has this in play, right? There are aligned actions when we are trying to recover from something that has stolen our life, addiction, trauma, codependency, people pleasing, the self abandonment, whatever it may be. There is aligned action that we are called to take. Sometimes that aligned action comes in connection, right? Allowing, going to a meeting, going to a circle, going to an about outing that you can be around people that are walking a similar path, right? Conversations are just going to land a little bit differently. A little bit differently. They may say something, they may do something, you may watch something, you may watch an interaction, you may watch how somebody treats somebody else in that instance, and like, poof, there you go. Sometimes you'll feel discomfort, right? Sometimes you'll feel discomfort. And you're going to wake up and realize you no longer enjoy the job that you had anymore, or a relationship, or a routine, right? Sometimes it's repetition, things that just keep swirling and circling around in your head, questions that refuse to be quiet, the same type of situation coming up. Sometimes it's reflection, right? You think something privately and somebody is going to say it right out loud back to you. You're like, oh my God, I was just thinking that. Right? The universe is going to continue to speak to us throughout recovery. Sometimes it's just in fatigue or being bored, right? Being told that you need to slow down. But sometimes it's in really big moments like towers, just completely everything falls apart, right? If you've asked the universe for help through your recovery, it's going to be speaking to you in these ways. You have to use these as a catalyst for change and then aligned action. And I get it. Sometimes there is an argument that I'll hear, and trust me, I've even used this before in my past. I'm just I'm trusting in the divine timing. I don't want to force it. If it's meant to happen, it will happen. Right. And on the surface, this sounds really beautiful to just trust, right? Be patient. And I agree, patience is necessary. But it is more likely that the universe is showing you shifts and changes to take and steps to do than you're giving yourself credit for. Because divine timing is rarely convenient or orderly, right? Our intuition is going to show up to try to guide and lead us through various different paths to get us to what it is that we want. I'm going to go back to the book. I finished a book, right? That book has been in the works since last May. So we're talking about almost 8 months ago, 9 months ago, right? It became an idea first. But even before that, 4 years before that, in 2021, I cast a spell and asked to be able to use my writing as a platform to share what I knew in the world. I didn't write as much back then in the way that I am now. I wrote, I blogged, I said some articles, but I didn't have a book published until last year. And now I'm on book number 2, right? So the trust here in the divine timing was trusting that I will be called to do what I need to do when the time's right. But once I decided to write that book last year, the second book, I've had a whole slew of actions that I've had to take, right? A whole slew of actions. Writing it, reviewing it, clarifying to make sure it met the outline that I initially set forward for, reviewing it again, changing additional things, going forward to editing, moving from editing into laying out, realizing laying out that there were pieces that were missing. All of these things are aligned actions. They were all needed to bring me to the point this past Friday where I could actually be at the cusp of making the book live, right? I mean, all I have to do is press go live. When we avoid things, when we don't listen to our intuition, mm, it can sometimes feel reasonable and logical, right? You could even ask an outside voice. And I've got a story on this one, right? In November of 2023, I started to get all of these signs that it was time for me to leave my corporate life, right? It was time for me to go. They were pretty consistent, right? I was dreaming differently, I was uneasy, I was getting kind of miserable in what I was doing. I was tired, right? Everything in me knew that I was ready. But at the exact same time, I hired a new business coach. Part of me thought I was going to work with her moving out of this transition, but I shared what I was sensing and they advised me not to leave. I went against my intuition. They gave me a rational reason, financial logic, strategic timelines, right? All of this responsible bullshit. So I deferred. I told myself I was being more patient, I was being strategic, I was being very mature. I told myself I was trusting in the divine timing that when it was meant to be, it would be, right? I mean, I'd hired her because she was the expert. So obviously, she must know better than my higher self. That is me with some real thick sarcasm right there. What I was doing was avoiding the decision because it was a really, really scary and uncomfortable decision. For about 5 months, I lived in this split reality. I was building a life while I remained tethered to the one I was trying to step out of. I worked constantly. I was burning the candle at both ends, and my energy was completely divided, and my nervous system paid the price. By the time I finally left corporate, like 5 months after this initial conversation with her, I was completely exhausted. And within a year of that initial conversation, I was threatening legal action against the same coach and grieving the loss of nearly $20,000 in months of my health. I even remember afterwards, like sitting in reflection with spirit and going like, wow, why did we get to this place? And spirit said, are you ready to trust me now? Wow, talk about a slap in the face. The universe never stopped speaking to me. I just was choosing voices that allowed me to delay. That's the danger of using divine timing when we label it avoidance as wisdom, right? We stay stuck in this place of convincing ourselves that we are aligned. Divine timing is not passive, right? It is very responsive, and the universe is going to place doors and invitations and disruptions in our path in order to keep us into that place of timing. I refused to engage. That was me opting out of a moment of co-creation. So I started talking about this before, but there are certain actions again that in recovery are very aligned. That community and connection is one of them. You never know who may be at those meetings, who may be at those circles, what they may be saying, what they may be presenting, how that they may be showing up, what you may need to hear in that moment, right? And it doesn't have to be weekly or twice a week or every day or anything like that. Maybe you just pick one meeting to go to once a month. Another thing is leaving the house when you're called, accepting any invitation, right? That seems healthy. I'll put that caveat. Don't the invitation to the brew house. maybe not. The invitation to your plug's house, maybe not, right? Um, but there's a lot of invitations that you're going to get, and I encourage you to say yes to, right? Because even just getting in the car sometimes can move you. That movement towards something can show the universe that you're willing to move. I can't tell you how many times that I've gotten in the car and heard messages, right? Because it's just this place for me to like receive. I'm just more consciously aware. Or I've turned the radio on and it's been told to me in a song. So often, movement just creates these openings that we're not otherwise aware of. And another thing is that resistance. I've come to realize that resistance is an indicator that something has to change, usually that I'm holding on to something. The universe does not require suffering. It's not like there's no, like, humans are this like work hard type of mentality. The universe is like, I want flow, I want ease, right? Look at what water can do. It will break down, until it begins to flow easy, right? It wants ease. That's what the universe wants. So when something begins to feel really heavy or draining or constricting, it's usually a sign that you need to pause and say, hey, what is it that I can release? What am I trying to hold on to that I need to let go of? Right? Fueling the body is another really, really aligned action, right? And by fueling, I mean through food, nutritious food, emotional regulation, through sleep. Because when we are in a good kind of like fed state, and I mean fed in all of these ways, right? Then we're not dehydrated, we're not overstimulated, we're not exhausted, and we're able to receive more messages, more clarity, right? Your spiritual guidance will become stronger in those states. The other thing, too, is when somebody is offering help, right? Asking for help or accepting of help. You have no clue what may be trying to show up when somebody is, when you're even like, when you're inspired to ask for help or when somebody is offering it. Maybe there's something meant there for the two of you. And there's a couple of places that I do believe a lot of folks in recovery, witches in recovery, will resist that aligned action. And the two of them, right? Slowing down and telling the truth. So many of us will resist slowing down. We fall right into this pattern of feeling guilty around slowing down, not doing stuff, resting, right? And it's because we've learned to stay busy. Like so many addicts that I found have this tendency for like keeping busy. I did it in a workaholic perspective. Others will do it in the drama. Will do it in their art or their craft. Will do it in the like, I've just got to do all of these things around the house, right? We tell ourselves that we can't stop and that rest is dangerous, but often we need to rest. Spirit might be asking for us to pause and slow down so it can show us something or give us something. And then the truth. So many of us are afraid of expressing the truth because of, what it may result in, but that might be the huge catalyst that you need for some kind of change, right? And last but not least, I want to talk about this other piece too. And it's a little bit in that it's like this other flavor of that resistance, which is the ruminating thoughts that can tend to like loop through in our mind. That is often an indication to me again that there's some truth that I'm resisting to speak out loud. Now, if you are casting spells and you're doing rituals and you're finding you're casting the same kind of flavor over and over again, and boy, did I have to kind of think about this one, right? Myself. And you are not changing your behaviors or your actions or doing something differently, you're telling the universe a very clear message. You're saying, I don't trust you. I'm going to ignore what you're putting into my path. And eventually the universe is going to stop offering, not to try to punish you, but just out of respect for you. They're saying like, hey, right? You're not willing to take the steps and the action. So you must not be ready for this. So I'm going to wait until you are. right? And when we are called to make those shifts and changes, again, and we don't, we can also start to show that in our body, right? Illness, exhaustion, emotional volatility, right? Low vibrational loops of shame and fear and guilt and apathy. All of these things can also lead us towards a relapse, right? Going back to again, a spell has been cast, it's not working out as you expected, which is often an indication you've not been taking the steps that you need. You've been ignoring the signs that you've been shown. And sometimes I'll just put this note in here as it's coming to mind. Sometimes the sign is like, hey, I've got a better way. But you don't want to pay attention to that because you expected it to show up in the way that you wanted. I want to be real clear about this as it relates to recovery too. There's a lot of work that we have to do when we step into recovery. And I was thinking about this earlier. Like, if you've spent decades in addiction or self abandonment or in like just in that whole trauma state, decades, right? For me, I'm 46. So we're talking about 40 years. I started drinking when I was 8, 32 years of drinking, right? That transformation that you want and desire is not going to happen in 90 days. The universe is working with you to rearrange your entire life. So I'm going to leave you with this. If every single spell or ritual that you cast was creating a sacred agreement between you and the divine, how would your responsibility change? Because that's what this is. You're saying, help me transform. I am willing to walk the path that you place in front of me. We have to be devoted to that path, willing to live inside the spell as long as we need to. If you want a different life, if you want true transformation, aligned action is not optional. It's a requirement. It's how we protect the relationship between us and the divine. It's how we honor that agreement. Trying to manifest without change, whew, wow, that's living in alignment. That is not living in alignment, right? That is not embracing magic. It's avoiding magic. And that starts to feel a lot more like addiction to me. Yeah. So if you're casting spells and you're doing magic and you're doing ritual to bring about changes in your life, make sure to pay attention because the universe is expecting you to hold up your end of that agreement. Until next time, my dear friends, much love from me to all of you.